shortly in introduction. It is the pleasure of Volunteer Guardianship One-on-One to present this community program. Volunteer Guardianship recruits, trains, and gives continuous education to individuals who volunteer to become a guardian for an individual who no longer has the ability to care or make decisions for themselves. Many of these adults have some kind of dementia or mental illness. Many have no family, or family that do not wish to care for them, or family that are inappropriate caregivers. I'd like to introduce some of the staff that's very important to our whole program. And I'd like to take a moment to introduce Cindy Douglas. Cindy, would you stand, please? She is the director. And if she were here, I would introduce Linda Patrick, who is the coordinator of our volunteers, and we work very closely with her. I'd also like to invite, at this point, Ken Davis, who is our president of the board. Ken, would you say a few words, please?
Thank you, Linda. Thanks, everybody, for coming out. It's always a great night when there's trouble finding a parking spot and there's some home, right? So I really appreciate everyone's interest in this topic. I mean, we probably see more than the typical person of abuse, exploitation, and neglect just because of the nature of our business. But that's why we wanted to raise this as a subject in our education series, because we want our guardians, we want our partners and our caretakers to all have a place to ask these speakers, you know, some of the important questions, like how do I recognize abuse, and how do I prevent it, and who do I report that to? And I really hope that tonight we can help facilitate that discussion and really kind of exchange, you know, best practices and how we all experience this, and get everyone really raise awareness of this issue. So thank you. Thanks for having dinner with us. Turn it back to Linda.
Thank you. When we do take a break, I'd like you to feel free to talk with any of the people I've introduced, including our panelists this evening, because if you have questions about guardianship in general, being a guardian, whatever, we welcome any of your inquiries. Just a few comments before our speakers begin. The largest growing aging population is the group of individuals that were born between the years 1946 and 1964, better known as the baby boomers, right. In 2011, the first baby boomer turned 65. When that happened, about 9,000 baby boomers a day turned 65. We are now 2019, and we are up to 10,000 baby boomers aging or turning 65. So the increase will continue. We aren't even at the height of the bell curve, which means people working for the care and protection of our most vulnerable individuals, particularly our elderly, are going to be working a lot harder. That's the news, folks. Exploitation and abuse of elderly is a very important topic, and why is that? Well, first of all, it's a threat to our most vulnerable population, which I've already mentioned, other than children. We need to know what resources are available to us in the community as professionals and also just being community members. Just one person cannot address all the issues in abuse and in exploitation. It is not a simple issue. And as you will see from the presentations of our panelists this evening, in any number of instances, you will find that will involve the law, social work, and medicine. It takes a group of professionals to work together to manage a case with a vulnerable older adult. And as you will also see as we go along in the program, the issues of exploitation and abuse of an older adult come to the surface in many different ways. It's not just one cookie cutter. situation. And they're also going to give us some advice on what to do if you see exploitation and abuse going on in your community. In your packets, we have given you an index card. And on that index card, as the speakers talk tonight, we'd like you to write down any questions you might have. We're going to have 5 different speakers in the first hour, and it may be hard to remember which person you want to ask the question to in your mind. So we've given you a card just to keep track of what questions and who you would like to put the question to. The program tonight is sponsored by a grant that was given to the volunteer guardianship, so I just wanted to let you know where our funding is coming from for this program. Okay, we have a panel of professional experts tonight that will speak to their experience and what they do to address the issues of exploitation and abuse. They will also give some advice on what to do if you see exploitation and abuse in your community. I'm going to start at the far end of our just introductions, but I have a different order for presentations. At the far right, my right, your left, is Detective Sergeant Peter Pfeiffer, and he is with the Prosecutor's Office in Hunterdon County. And by the way, all of our panelists are Hunterdon County employed, so they're dealing with the issue of abuse and exploitation in Hunterdon County. To his left is Susan Nicola, who is a social worker supervisor with Social Services for Adult Protection. Many times that's one of the first line to pick this issue up. To her left is Dr. John Heath, who is a geriatrician with the Center for Healthy Aging with the Hunterdon Medical Center. To his left is Raina Post, who is the social worker supervisor at Hunterdon Medical Center. And to her left is Robert Shanahan, attorney at law. He is an elder law attorney with Shanahan and Voight, and he's also our advisor to volunteer guardianship on legal issues. So, starting with our first speaker this evening, I'd like to introduce John Heath, MD.
My turn. I thought you were going to go on and on. My mother loves me and all that. Good evening, it's a pleasure to be here. The panel and I were just discussing, I think the synopsis was we're supposed to tell you what we've seen and what we do about it, I guess. So let me tell you a couple scenarios that I've seen, which will hopefully be a little bit of an icebreaker on a kind of a challenging topic, but also I'll invite my fellow panelists to rip into some of the comments that I'll make and kind of have a dialogue back and forth. I've done presentations on elder mistreatment for 20 years or so. It actually got me tenure at medical school. This was the topic that I got a tenure at related to it. So it's an area of passion for me even before I came to Hunterdon County a couple years ago. Let me tell you 3 stories that are vividly seared up here. One is a case of an individual, I believe it was in Edison, so that would be what Middlesex County, not Hunterdon. Mailman came to take the mail out of the post office box from this apartment and saw an envelope that wasn't completely sealed. And jagging out of the corner of the envelope were $100 bills. And apparently postal workers are allowed, when they see something like that, to turn it over to the local postmaster because this is not safe. And that was the impetus to involve the Adult Protective Service that eventually had me go out and talk to this wonderful retired nurse. Passionate piano player. My background, when I was in high school, my piano teacher said, you know what? Don't do piano lessons anymore. But I always loved music. And when I went to see this woman, she had an organ in her living room, and she played Bach like you would never believe. It was just breathtaking. Completely perfectly oriented. Just wonderful, witty. ICU nurse, retired X number of years. And for the last about 7 or 8 months, she'd been getting calls pretty regularly from an unknown gentleman down in Miami whose dear mother was being held in a jail down in Miami and she couldn't get bail. So all he needed to get his beloved mother out of the jail was about 5,000. No, it was 15,000. And then, they needed to get better lawyers. The one lawyer they had down there really didn't speak English. You know, people in Florida, they don't speak English. So it would be another 30,000. And my mother really loved the block too. And in other words, the story went on and on and on. She had been mailing about $78,000 cash. Because that was interstate commerce, somehow the FBI got involved with that. My role in that case was to assess this woman who knew precisely that, I believe Clinton was the president back then, and was able to kind of spell world backwards and do all the cognitive testing along the way, and just had this wonderful heart to help this poor gentleman's mother who was in jail in Miami and couldn't get out. I'm sure the Nigerian scam. When I first came out of Jerry Fellowship, I took my first faculty job. This was in Syracuse, New York. And there was a wonderful nursing facility, still is there, that had a long-term care unit. And I was assigned that long-term care unit, and one of the patients there was Mona. And I got a chance to see Mona, but every time I walked in the room, she just screamed like you wouldn't believe. She got along fine with the female doctors, as well as the female aides. But anytime a man came in to see her, and I was assigned her doctor, it was really tough. It was one of the few times, perhaps I should do it more, but I actually had a chaperone that had to come in with me when I would examine her periodically. Pretty young doctor, but still had some pretty good knowledge along the way. One of the interesting things she had was extension contractions. Anyone heard of contractions? When joints kind of contract up? Sometimes when an individual has a stroke, oftentimes the side of the body that's paralyzed will curl. Usually that's called a flexion contraction. Sometimes wonderful rehab places like where we're at tonight will do splinting and try to get the contraction to open up. This woman had extension contractions. She laid in bed this way. I was sitting at the nursing station one day, and the mail had come, and this shows you how long ago it was. There was a clerk, a clerk at a nursing station that was handling the mail, and one of the envelopes was the Major League Baseball. I recognized the thing. I grew up watching the Pittsburgh Pirates. And it was the funds from Major League Baseball that were paying for her long-term care, interestingly. So the ward clerk, actually, who was a real fan of the Cleveland Indians, said that, yeah, you have to look up this person's, I won't use the last name, but it ended up being the widow of a Cleveland Indian pitcher who got very disturbed when his then 40, 50-year-old bride, I forget how old she was, actually developed early onset Alzheimer's. And he was very embarrassed about that because the rest of the players would take their bombshell brides out, and he couldn't take his wife. So he left her at home. And when he got back from road trips, he needed some conjugal visits and decided that she should just stay in bed. And since she wanted to get up, he restrained her in bed. Yes. Let me tell you another case after bringing you down to kind of bring this back up. How many people in the room are cat people versus dog people? Dog people? Okay, I'm a dog person too. Cat people. Okay, cat people. How many cats are too many cats? 2. Let's do an auction. I hear 2. More than 3. Anybody double digits? Oh. How about triple digits? Where I live, outside Hunterdon County, there's an awful lot of deer, and we hate the people that put out the salt licks for the deer. So it's one thing to have too many deer, it's another thing to have too many cats. Another individual that I went to see had apparently at one time 217 cats. That's what the house smelled like. The neighbors didn't like that at all. But does she have the right to do that? Fascinating interactions along the way. We did that same bidding process with the Adult Protective Service social workers. This was Somerset County. And the range was outrageous. Some people would argue kind of like, how much should you drink alcohol? As long as you drink less than your doctor, you're in good shape. As long as you have fewer cats and whatever is objectionable goes back and forth. What I'm suggesting in all 3 of these situations is that there's a wide spectrum out there. So one of the things that I really admire about what Belinda did is that we have a panel that's kind of like that story about the blind men and the elephants. So I'm a medical doctor, so I'm feeling one part of the elephant, but you're going to hear lots of different other perspectives of elephants along the way. From a medical standpoint, one of the things I do for an individual who's a victim, or potentially a victim along the way, is to get an idea of what their capacity is like. Not competency. We'll hear from Attorney Shanahan that that's not a healthcare provider's purview. At least I think you're going to tell me about that. but more in terms of can an individual understand what's going on. Obviously, if an individual lacks the ability to understand what it takes to function in this world, in other words, if they've lost their capacity to manage their own affairs and or their own personal care, then oftentimes, ta-da, that's what you guys can come in for along the way. Obviously, in the context of evaluating that, I think it's reasonable to ask the medical professional to get an idea of what the duration of this is. You know, on New Year's Eve, many of us perhaps aren't in our best capacity along the way, but we don't need a guardianship of January 1st. We need to sober up. Likewise, if my 3 cats died, for those cat people in the room, probably that next day would not be at your finest. So if you had to negotiate your 401k or get your taxes due, by the way, that comes up next week, taxes next week. In other words, you may not be quite as sharp as what you need to do. So in other words, there's fluctuations. That's not dementia, we understand that. That's just the normal, you know, where are my glasses, where are my glasses? Are these my glasses? You know, those type of things. That's forgetfulness. That's different than actually having a significant amount of memory impairment that then impacts your function. That's the definition of dementia. Dementia is not amnesia. Amnesia is most commonly seen on soap operas. Amnesia is incredibly rare. Dementia is incredibly common, and the distinction being that it's memory loss that impacts your function. And to the extent that it affects your function, beyond a certain threshold, and again, that's in the eye of the beholder. Remember that Supreme Court ruling of the justice that said, I don't know what pornography is, but I know it when I see it? The capacity for individuals to be able to function is oftentimes a moving target, but clearly, you know, the extreme, you know, sexual, physical abuse, clearly the mailing, you know, desperately needed funds for this poor nurse who's needed this for a long term, and then this issue of too many cats. Those are kind of the gray areas that we deal with. I'll be interested to hear what my other fellow panelists have to say. Thanks.
Okay. The second person that's going to be speaking with you this evening, he's a professional, Robert Shanahan, attorney at law. He works with Voight, Shanahan and Voight, and he's the advisor for volunteer guardianship. Bob Shanahan.
As an elder law attorney, the way I get into this situation is people come to my office, or maybe I got to sign something from the court. Over 30 years, I've watched one case come around, and then a long time will pass before I see another. I can tell you now that a week does not go by where I don't see at least one, many times 2 cases of elder abuse in the county, or something close to it. Usually, a grandson or a daughter will come to my office without the elder person and describe to me what their crazy brother is doing, or what the sort of person who's a guardian or power of attorney is doing. I've had some horrific cases that I could probably tell you all night if you want to hear them, make your hair curl. Right here in Hunterdon County, it isn't other places we expect it there, but it's right here. Hunterdon County, according to what comes into my office, has a plethora of 50, 65-year-old males who don't like to work, will stay in their mother's house and sit on the couch, mooch off of her monetarily, and while pot parties on the weekend, and other things on the weekend. And then they will try to systematically get mom to sign the deed of the house over to her, and when she does, they will marginalize her, they'll bring in their significant other, and they will abuse mom physically and mentally until she can't stand it anymore, or maybe just put it to a home, and then that one child takes possession of the house to the exclusion of all the others, and then holy hell breaks loose, okay? Elder abuse tends to be both financial and physical, although it can be separate. Many times that I deal with it together. There's an entitlement feeling of, to quote one of the jerks who was at my client, I had to put her in a nursing home, and she had extreme dementia and couldn't function, so we had to put her in a memory care unit. I got a phone call from the nurse at the nursing home telling me she found her son standing over her on the ground, yelling at her, "Why don't you die so I get the money I need to live?" Okay. I can tell you stories all day about this right here in Hunterdon County. Okay. One of my favorite ones, and it haunts me all the time, is this poor woman who's had 4 daughters. One daughter took her home to her house, just picked her up, took her to her house, kept her on the outside porch with the dog. She had a bed out there. She went to the mother's house, put down the dogs with antifreeze, and then sold the house out from under and threw away all personal belongings. She mooched off, and the 2 sisters came to my office in a panic. What do we do? What do we do? I filed a court action, and then the sister sent her to another sister in the state of Missouri to try to escape New Jersey jurisdiction. Fortunately, the judge in Somerville retained New Jersey jurisdiction, ordered her to come back, and she, of course, did not come back. Eventually, she died penniless. I can, again, tell you stories all the time about this. What do? Well, I find most of in my practice as an attorney, I try to be preventative. I see how many parents come in to see me to do a will, power of attorney, living will, and they say, I ask them, do your kids get along? Because, mom wants to make all 4 kids co-guard, powers of attorney, or co-executor, and I have to tell them, no. Well, they don't get along. Well, understand that everybody says that, but the experience in my office is very different. They don't. As soon as you pass away, all the gloom is gone, and the green-eyed monster comes in and takes over, and they want to know, why did mom name my stupid sister the executor? It's gotten to the point where I tried years ago to try to get these cases mediated instead of going into court, because if a family goes into court, it's going to be destroyed. If you want to know how, just see me later. So we try to get this out of court and settled so the family survives the situation, but unfortunately there's always one. Usually the son-in-law or the daughter-in-law speaking into the kid's ear, you got a good case. Just bring it before the judge. You want to hear it. The judge will hear that. You'll win. No, the judges don't want to hear this anymore. It's sick. It's endemic. It's got to stop. The problem is that there isn't enough attention being paid to this. It is not serious to anyone, except the people involved. How many times, and I don't mean no disrespect to anyone. I understand the situation. The police say, well, we're not going to get involved. Police say, it's a civil matter. No, it's not. I beg to differ. When I was 5 years old, when I was told you stole money was a crime, I watched all the cop shows, Adam 12 and all that. I saw that as a crime. Don't tell me it's a civil matter. This is ridiculous. Okay? Then you go to the prosecutor's office. No disrespect. But for some reason, there's always, not just 100 and everywhere, except maybe California, where they have a special prosecutor for this. It just never gets prosecuted. Well, in the eastern counties, of course, they have bigger things to worry about, murders and all kinds of stuff, and well, this kind of gets pushed to the side. It's a very serious condition. It's going on and on and on. The funding isn't there. These poor people that have to deal with this stuff on a social level, they get paid nothing. They don't have the resources to do what they have to do. No one is taking this seriously, and it's got to stop. As you can tell, I have a button this big on my chest. If you push it, my eyes roll back in my head. I'm going to do something, okay? I'm going to go to court, and I'm going to put a complaint in front of the judge saying, Judge, this is what I see. Please appoint a guardian ad litem, someone to investigate this. And then I step back. I'm not going to go to sleep at night. There's just too much of this going on. It's got to stop. 99% of the time it's with the kids. It's always the kids. It's the son-in-law and the daughter-in-law, too. Always the son-in-law, by the way. Watch the son. So, we have to get serious about this. And that's why I like coming here. I want to have this community discussion. Because it's overlooked. The resources aren't given there. These poor people have jobs to do and they can't do them because they don't have the money. They pay the people nothing. And there's these issues that are going on and people are getting hurt very badly. And we're not getting things done. I like volunteer guardianship. I've lived in volunteer guardianship for about 12 years. It's not just finding guardians for people who are incapacitated. I just think it's for people who have inappropriate family members. That son-in-law, a son, the daughter who's trying to, she said, that's my retirement. That's my retirement you're giving away to that nursing home. No, it's not. Mom's not dead yet. Okay, it's her money. She She needs somewhere to live. Volunteer guardianship will step in that gap and be guardian and help these poor people and get the things that need to be done. It's a bright light out there in our community, and I'm very happy to be involved with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Don't forget to write your questions down on your index cards as we go along. Okay, our third speaker, I'm going to switch things up a little bit. I'm going to invite Susan Nicola, who works with Adult Protective Services with the county. She can tell you stories that you would not believe as well. She's sort of a frontline worker. A lot of complaints come to her, and I'm going to give her all the time she needs right now to tell us why.
Thank you. So I have been the supervisor for Adult Protective Services for about 3 years. We field about 300 referrals a year. There are 2 other social workers in the unit. So we're pretty busy, and that's not all we do, but APS keeps us very busy. The APS law is about 25 years old. They're currently revamping it to make it a little bit better. But it does give us a sort of broad powers to get into situations and get a lot of information about people, which helps our investigations. But it does also limit some of the things that we can do. So we can only become involved in cases that meet 3 criteria. One is the report must concern an adult over the age of 18 living in the community. So someone in a facility like this, or in a group home, or in another nursing home, we wouldn't be able to investigate a case like that. The person must be subject to abuse, neglect, or exploitation, and the person must meet the legal definition of vulnerable, which is outlined in the APS law. And it means that someone has to lack the ability to take in information, process information, make decisions, act on their own behalf. So there is a misconception that all older people are vulnerable, but that's not really true. The law is actually very specific. We have clients between the ages of 18 and 99. The younger cases are tough. They're a lot harder to solve. Some of them, when we get them at 18, it really feels like it would have been more appropriate to have it handled by DCP&P, because they often offer more services. But once someone is an adult, they are presumed to have the capacity to act on their own behalf, and it's a lot harder to intervene if they don't want that intervention. We receive referrals from everybody, from first responders, from doctors, from attorneys, from the hospital, from nursing homes that are discharging people into situations that, are not ideal. But anyone can make a referral, and we always encourage people to call if they have concerns about somebody. It doesn't matter whether you think they meet those criteria that we just talked about, but if you have concerns, I would much prefer that you call me and we talk it out, and maybe I can refer you somewhere else, or maybe we can, take it on as a case, but we can talk it out, and I would always prefer that somebody call rather than not call, because sometimes you're the only person that knows. A lot of these cases happen behind closed doors, within families, and people don't know. And if you have an opportunity to kind of shine a light on a situation that's not good for somebody, I would really just prefer that you call us. All referrals are anonymous. Everyone making a referral has immunity. We have immunity investigating the case, and we will respond within 72 hours. So we'll go out, we'll actually see the person, we'll do an investigation, we'll look at their environment, we'll look at their functioning within that environment, we'll test their cognitive capacity, we'll see what kind of services we can offer them, and even if they're not, say, APS appropriate for a case that's going to continue, we can still make referrals, we can still offer them services. We're happy to do that. We are social workers first. So if we see someone who has a need that we can fill, we're happy to do that, whether we take you on for APS or not. If we think a crime is committed, we refer it to the prosecutor. Occasionally we have to go to court and try to get someone a guardian. If there's nobody that's there to kind of step up and help that person, we work with volunteer guardians all the time. They've been really wonderful for us. They take on not just the easy cases, but some of the really tough cases that we have. And our goal is to stabilize the situation in the least restrictive and least intrusive method possible. So if we can keep someone in the community with services, that is what we want to do. We don't want to have to put people in institutions. We can't do that anyway. The court has to do that, but we would never recommend that if it wasn't absolutely positively necessary. So nationally, there's about 500,000 cases of elder abuse reported every year, but they say that probably 93% or so go unreported. So we're talking about, millions of people who are in bad situations that are not reported to anybody. Our referrals are primarily neglect. They come in as neglect referrals, so self-neglect and caregiver neglect. But that doesn't really paint the whole picture, because what comes in as a neglect referral is often, just a whole host of things. All of the categories of abuse overlap. So abuse, neglect, exploitation. Where there's neglect, there's almost always exploitation. Exploitation is huge. It's huge in this county, it's huge in New Jersey, and nationally, as Bob was saying. It's just a huge problem. And it's primarily family members, but not always. I mean, there are people who are falling prey to scammers, and not people who necessarily even lack capacity. These are educated people. I have a Princeton grad who's a client who is currently homeless because he cannot stop giving his money away to people who call him on the phone. And he's literally homeless. So it does happen, and the scams are pretty good, and they're very aggressive. So if you get ensnared in that situation, it's very hard to get out of it. They will come to your house. They will call you relentlessly. It's a tough situation. So no matter how the referral comes in, it's almost always exploitation. The family is almost always involved, and when there's a differential in financial, so when one party is dependent on the other party, whether it's the caregiver or the person who needs care, it always creates a financial tension that doesn't benefit the person who needs the care. So why does this happen? Caregiver abuse and neglect can happen when a caregiver is overwhelmed, and we take that into account when we're investigating these cases. We have a separate category for caregivers that are overwhelmed versus caregivers that are intentionally neglecting their loved one. But some caregivers lack maturity or empathy, some have substance abuse problems, mental illness, and are thrust into the role of caregiving, or think that they must do it because it's a family member, and they are ill-equipped to do it, and it just goes badly. 90% are family members, and exploitation, while we don't think of it maybe as the same as neglect or abuse, it really does take its toll on a senior's health. So after neglect, it's the next thing that increases the mortality of seniors over the next 5 years if they're exploited. They lose their resources, they can have strained family relationships, they can lose their housing. It's a very tough situation. Patterns develop in families, and sometimes, this is the way that people have treated each other, but abuse tends to escalate over time, and it gets worse. And when someone is declining and presumably, sucking the resources of the family for their care, that's when we see the worst abuses happen. So I just want to end by saying, please refer. If you have any questions about any situation that you see, any questions about any senior that you know, or any vulnerable adult that you know, please call us, because we are happy to talk to you about anyone at any time. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicole. You know, every state has elder protection laws. I'm not going to go into where we are or what the story is, but I will tell you the #1 state for the best elder law protection is Massachusetts, and I will leave it at that. Okay. And we're a long way from Massachusetts. All right. Another place that I think that we pick up elder abuse or exploitation is in the hospital. And I would be negligent in not inviting somebody who deals with that on a daily basis, sees what comes in, and many people may be just left in the emergency room as an example. And I would like to invite Raina Post to come up and talk about that. She is the supervisor for social workers in Hunterdon Medical Center, so she is responsible for all the social workers there. And she does one heck of a job. Raina, could you come up, please?
Thank you, Linda. Yeah, my staff over at the medical center deals with patients in all areas of the hospital, not just the emergency room, cancer center, behavioral health, and medical. But we do see a bulk of our referrals to Susan's team, actually, both in the emergency room and on the medical floors, and for both areas. Caregiver neglect that's unintentional, just from caregiver stress, and caregivers being overwhelmed by medical situations, financial situations, and unintentionally not doing the best by their loved one. But we also see those patients and families where the individual is being intentionally neglected, abused, and exploited. We had a situation a few years ago where we had a gentleman whose family had hired an unknown person to care for him. That unknown person died, and he actually, the patient that we had, ended up calling the police after unfortunately falling over the person's body in his home. He was brought to the emergency room. We called his daughters. They came to the emergency room to meet with me, and we were working to get him into a respite, into a nursing home while we worked everything out. And as soon as they found out that they would have to turn over some of his finances in order to pay for him to go to the nursing home, they literally said to me, "We're leaving, he's your problem now," and walked out the door and left him. And he was a gentleman who had dementia. We worked along with volunteer guardianship actually to get him a guardian, get him onto Medicaid, because we proved that the family had no intention of caring for him. And actually, he was a resident here for a number of years until he died not that long ago. So that's something that my staff sees all the time. Unfortunately, and I don't have the horror stories that Susan does, but we do see a lot of horror stories. We see people coming in from homes where they've been not having any type of physical care for weeks, with bed sores, with poor hygiene, starved. We've had patients come in that weighed 60 pounds and are 85 years old and 5'6", 5'10", who should not be weighing that much. We've had patients who've been locked in buildings because they're demented and their family didn't know what to do with them, and so they locked them in a building with no running water, no power, and no food. So when they're in the hospital, our goal is to get them to a safe place as much as possible and try to determine, is there someone in the family that can, take control of the situation. In the situations where there's not, we work to get them a guardian. Sometimes there are family members who are out of the area and aren't aware of what's going on, and we can involve them and then either get them safely here or sometimes back to the community, and in working with Susan's team, make sure that they stay in the best environment as possible. But I think it's important to remember that I agree with exactly what Susan says. If you see something suspicious, call someone. Society says if you see something about a child, or you see something, a suspicious package, but we don't talk enough about if you see something that's concerning about an elder person, there's not commercials about that and billboards about that, and there should be, because there's a lot of people who are going through horrific situations that unfortunately are slipping through the cracks. And the more that we can make people aware of it, and the more that we can make resources available for them, the better it can be. So, thank you for that.
Raina, just one question. Could you explain a little bit about the emergency guardian that you interact with in the
Yes.
hospital?
We do have, volunteer guardianship actually has an emergency guardian. What happens is a lot of times we're in situations in the hospital where the person, we can't obviously have the family make emergency medical decisions, and sometimes we need emergency medical decisions made, whether it be a surgery, whether it be putting a breathing tube in or removing a breathing tube, making emergency, basically, medical decisions. So we will work with the court to declare someone an emergency guardian that can make those decisions. Sometimes it's getting them connected to Medicaid quickly so that we can have a placement for them, because otherwise, unfortunately, those patients languish in the hospital sometimes for months. We've had them in the hospital for over a year, where we've had situations where we couldn't get the emergency guardian for one reason or another. So we try to work with that with the court when we can and when we have those situations.
Our emergency guardian, we only have one. We used to have a few, but unfortunately, we don't have them any longer. But our emergency guardian is an absolute angel in that she is the person who tries to mobilize all resources almost simultaneously with someone who is in need of so much help, and they're in the hospital. Being in the hospital has its good points when you're ill, but when you're not ill, it doesn't feel like a good place to be. And so it's important to try to get the person out as quickly as possible for their own health and their mental health. So we're very proud that we have somebody that really steps up like that. I have, I want to say the best for last, because he's got a video for us. But it is my pleasure, though, to introduce, one second, Detective Sergeant Peter Pfeiffer. He is with law enforcement with the prosecutor's office. And he started his law enforcement career with the Attorney General's office, so he's got some incredible background. And in 2003, he came to the Hunterdon County Prosecutor's office. He supervises the Major Crimes Unit and has a bachelor's degree in economics and a master's in business management. So we are really honored tonight to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
You guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right. Everybody having a good time so far? It's been one horrible story after another. I think maybe I'll tell you about some dead bodies or something. Share up the room a little bit. So I'll try to. So thanks for inviting me. You know, you said you had free food, and as soon as I heard the word free, you know the cops are going to come.
No donuts.
No donuts. You know, trash the cops. All right. So let me just. I have very brief. I'm not going to torture you with the slides, and I'm sorry if you trying to look over my shoulder. So, Peter Pfeiffer worked for the prosecutor's office. You heard my bio, okay? Prosecutor's office here is very interesting because we wear a lot of hats. We have, being as it's Hunterdon and there's no crime here, narcotics, sex crimes, and anything else we call major crimes. Whether that's, I mean, really, it's Hunterdon County, so it's pretty much medium crimes with an occasional major sprinkled in. But if we have a cat stuck up in a tree or a homicide, it comes through me. Okay. So there's things we were talking earlier. There's things I didn't even know I was in charge of until the case happened. I didn't know I was our bias crimes officer. But here you go. So one of the things I do is the elder abuse, white collar crimes, fraud, things like that. All right. So what are we here for? I want to tell you just some of the basic scams. Let me back up. I've done this presentation one before. I'm not a polished speaker. And the first time I did it was a disaster. We had this guy that was with us, and he bombarded everybody with all these different scams, like the dark web and all these things. People were terrified to go on their computer after that. The reality. You know, I called my mother in Florida. I said, this is how it went. I don't think she's mailed a letter since. Like in the mailbox, like she sent my father out to immediately rip it off. You know, she thinks that everybody's gonna scam her. So let me tell you about stuff I've actually seen here in this county. Okay, things that have actually happened, and the reality is, I'm sorry to say, that is an answer we have to give a lot of times, that it's civil. So I want to tell you guys how not to have this happen to you. Okay, so let's start. You know, everybody in this room was born with common sense. You know, use it, and I'll point that out to you. I'll show you. Not to insult the crowd here. So let me just prove to you that I'm the luckiest guy in Hunterdon County. I actually am the luckiest guy in Nigeria, because these are actual emails I got from my work computer. This is my work email address. I'm sorry. Do you want me to sit down? Can you see a little bit, or you guys are okay?
Yeah.
So here, this is 300. If I just send all my account information at $385, I have $5,000 coming to me. I'm not going to try to pronounce where that's from. Whoever does gets, you know, a free cookie. But I have $8.5 million coming to me. There's 40 million coming. I have a daughter in college. I shouldn't be worried at all, because I have 40 million in the bank in Nigeria. So as long as she signs up for the University of Nigeria, I'm good. But she's only a weapon. Right? Here's again, Bank of Israel, just to play a little, you know, keep it even, and another 500 grand coming. So on and on and on. This is my work computer. All right. There's a detective in our office. He gets the same thing all the time. All right. What do we see more than anything else in our office? We don't really get too much physical abuse. I mean, it's sprinkled in. I'm talking in the ratio, okay? I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm talking the ratio is scams. And what will happen is I'll get a phone call in my office and they'll say, there's an elderly gentleman in the lobby and he's got a binder full of canceled checks. I'm like, oh God. And I try to hide, but they find me anyway and I go out. Why am I depressed? Is it because I want to work? No, it's because I know the reality of what he's going to show me, okay? He's going to come to me and tell me, and this has actually happened, that he has been sending money because he won the lottery, and that happened in Reddington. I had a woman send $174,000, cleaned out their entire retirement fund. This is the bad part, right, where you bring them down, build them up. And the husband had to go back to work. She was suicidal. But that happens all the time, and they go down to Western Union, and then once they, you guys, I don't remember who said it, once they get their hooks in you, they're relentless. And I get calls all the time, all right, but just hang up, all right? So the question is, honestly, did I enter a lottery? I mean, it sounds ridiculous to say that, but did I actually enter a lottery? No, I didn't. How am I being called? What is the message? Lots of times what you'll see, all those things, if I wasn't going quickly, you would see a lot of misspellings. That's a very common thing. When you see an email that has a lot of weird language, and look carefully before you start clicking on things. The phone number will be like plus 704, it's like 27 digits long. That's coming from overseas, okay? So just use your common sense on that. But that is the case. The person, and here's the reality, okay? I'd rather tell you the truth than give you some false sense, because these guys have given you great advice today. When you're in that lobby with your canceled checks, and it went to Nigeria, I can't help you. I'm not going to Nigeria. I'm never going to get it. The money is gone. So I'd rather get it in your head now. Well, wait a minute. You know, what is that email I just got? Does that make sense? You know, did I enter the, you know, Uganda lottery system? No, I don't think so. So, and then again, that's the key thing. Are they asking for information that they shouldn't be? Now, sir, if I've been, the second one here, if I was to ask you, I'd like you to go to ShopRite tonight and just stand up in the cold cut aisle and say, this is my name, date of birth, social security number, here's my bank account number, routing number, which you would never do that, right? But why would you do that to somebody on an email that you've never met before? And people will do that all the time. Oh, well, I have $5 million coming to me. I just have to send them 5,000. Boom, boom, boom. Here's my routing number, you know, and they'll do it. So just think when you when you see things like that, would I do that in real life? You know, no, of course not. And of course, does it sound too good to be true? What do you guys think? Right? I mean, the good thing for us, we're all county employees. Nobody's ever going to rip us off because we have no money. Oh wait, so the Sam artist in Nigeria is going to be like, oh, that's not an account. No, you know, go to Bergen. So, again, how am I being called? Do I have a grandson? Let's start there. You know, just a simple question. But what they'll do lots of times is, you ever see these people on TV that can like talk to the dead? What they do is they get you talking and they listen to things back. So you're like, you know, hi, this is calling from Florida, your grandson's in jail. And you're like, Frankie's in jail? Now you just said Frankie, so now they know. You follow what I'm saying? So, do they have the information first? Can they tell me something that only my grandson would know? I mean, quite frankly, you know, my mother got a call that her grandson was in jail. She'd probably say, leave him in there. And you say, all right, let me call his parents and tell them. And they're like, no, we can get him out right now. You know, things like that are going to be the warning signs. And then here's the key thing. With all these scams, actually, how are they asking me to send the money? Okay? So if you get, I want money, or I owe a bill, or my computer's down and they want me to send a check, they usually don't want you to send like a Visa gift card, or a Walmart card, or it's dated now, but iTunes used to be the thing, you know? So you know that's ridiculous. It's not how you would ever pay it. Like, you're paying your public service bill. You write a check, or you go online, right? You don't pay them like gift cards. So again, it sounds preposterous, but to the people up here, you see this every day, right? You see this every day. A little bit of a spin-off on that, you mentioned earlier. The relative's been kidnapped. It's a little takeoff on that. Sometimes I'll have people, you know, screaming in back, making a whole big thing. I'm not kidding. I had a similar case here with an identity theft, and the guy recruited drug addicts to pretend that people that he ripped off to call them and activate their credit card. So, and for a few dollars, he'll do anything. So, and again, they're going to count on your emotions. So, if you have anything that you're not comfortable with, take a step back. Okay, and I think you mentioned something earlier like that. Slow down. If he's in jail, he's in jail. Okay, he's not going anywhere. If he's kidnapped, how realistic is that? You know, first of all, it's unlikely. Slow down and call law enforcement. All right, and you want to call, like I work for the prosecutor's office. I'm the detective. You want to call your local cop, not because I don't want to do the work, although you know I got enough work to do. But you want to start with the local cop, right, and get them involved. And if they tell you no, then you know right off the bat that it's pretty shaky. Something I've had numerous times on my computer. Everybody here, you go online, right? You ever get that little block that pops up and says it's Microsoft, call this number, there's a malfunction? It's not. That's not how they know it. They don't notify you that way. Okay? We have to go work on your computer after the class now?
I'm not using it anymore.
No. And I'm going to tell you this at the end. So, like, don't be terrified by our presentations here. That's the main thing I'm going to want you to get across. But there is not a guy sitting on the other side of your computer being like, oh my God, look what Mary got herself into tonight. You know, click, let me save her. That's not how it works. If there's a problem with your computer, there's not somebody on your side that's going to say, call me, and by the way, give me your bank account number, we can fix this. Just click off. And then when it tells you, don't click off anymore. Get out of there and stop. Yeah, because right, you're sitting there with the computer like, I don't remember having any problem, everything seems to be working. It's because it's a scam. And again, what do they want from me? Do they want my bank account? Will they give me a phone number? You know, let me call you right back. Let me see if I can fix this myself, I'll call you back. No, sir, we can stay on the line right now. And where does it sound like, not to pick on any countries like India, but where does it sound like they're calling me from? I can barely hear you, sir. You know, that's because it's somebody overseas doing a scam. I just said that. Okay, no offense, but this is my turn to blast you now, right? So, a lot of people in the room have power of attorney. Don't be terrified by that. Okay, and I think you might want to, the bathroom is out that way. You might want to address that when you come back. But don't be afraid of power of attorney. It's an important thing, it's a useful tool, but the key thing is like, it's still your money. You know, you're not just here, solve all my problems. You know, I mean, you're in charge now. I had a grandson, it's typically the grandson, more than anything else. And went to town, bought himself a hot tub, bought himself this, bought himself that. The problem for us in law enforcement is, well, twofold. You signed over power of attorney. You gave him the rights to manage your money. And as long as there is a very, very thin thread of that he can explain why, oh, my grandmother feels good in the hot tub. That's why. You know, she's got a bad hip. it becomes very difficult for the attorneys. The second thing, and more typical, is maybe grandmama's starting to have some dementia. So when I want to go out and interview her to take her statement, did you actually tell him he could buy this? You know, and grandma has like 3 marbles in her head. I can't get any kind of valid statement. She doesn't make a credible witness. I can't prove that she didn't say buy a hot tub. You follow what I'm saying? So it's your money. Like, I'm cheap, so I love my money. So first of all, we work in the county, like I said, we don't have much. So I watch every dollar like I can. Do the same, this is your money. Just because you signed over control, it's still you, okay? So keep an eye on your money, ask questions. And you made a great point, because that's when, on my side, I see things. Grandparents are getting, up there, maybe they're going to pass away soon, everybody's starting to get nervous. Here comes the daughter from California that hasn't been in the family in 14 years. There comes the brother from Louisiana who hasn't spoken to the daughter. And, oh, my mother, I love her, And then first stop is usually to see mom for flowers. Second is to the bank to make sure the 400 grand is still there. And where is it? And then that's when you find out that the grandson has cleaned them out. So just be careful with what you're doing. That's really what solves 90% of the cases we see, really. It's just take a step back, use your common sense, be careful with what you're doing, the decisions you're making. Like, for example, I'm going off on a tangent, but a contractor. Somebody wants to have a contractor come do some work on your house. Okay, it's going to be $10,000 to repair the screen and porch. But I need it all up front in cash. No, don't do that. Again, what was my original theme? Trust your common sense. No, I want a written contract. I'll give you $1,000, and then I want to see stages of the work, Like, I don't want to say don't trust anybody, but just be a little cautious, and you'll solve 90% of the problems we've talked about here. Call the cops. Shred your documents. I do this, so I'm the worst offender, with the flag. But that's one thing, sometimes people will go around and take the mail out because, especially now at tax time, people are mailing their tax returns. They see the flag up, go take their tax returns. Now I have your date of birth, your social, all your personal information, where we go. So that would be something maybe just to think about. Again, there's the theme. Most important thing, don't panic, okay? I don't know that we really got that across from here today. Everybody up here is here to help you. There's fantastic people up here. If you can go on the internet, after you talk about your computer's fine. You're going to be fine. They're going to move on to somebody else. When you get that phone call saying, please give me this is your bank, blah, blah, blah. Either hang up and then say, your bank isn't calling you at 8 o'clock at night to work out a problem. Hang up and then go to your bank the next day. Take some control. Take control of these things. And you're going to be fine. You have questions, you have a whole group of people that are fantastic. Hey, let me bounce that off. Or go to somebody you trust and say, to the bank, for example, hey, they just said this happened. Before I go send this, what do you think? And even the banks sometimes, they're limited on what they can't call us and say, this was her 8th time in here this week to write it, to withdraw money. It's your money, you can do whatever you want. And they're kind of in a weird spot. The hospital is in a terrible situation. They see things that something's up. Like your spider sense, you know it. And if you've been doing it long enough, you really know it. It's like, my mother used to be an elementary school teacher. She would have the kids pegged in first grade. Oh, that was bad news. You know it, you just see it, you know what I mean? So, but they're limited. So take control of your situation. Yeah, don't make yourself crazy. And I guess this is when we're going to throw the questions. Yeah, that's it for me, so.
Okay, so we're going to take a brief recess. We're going to get you out to either bathrooms or come up for dessert. We're going to take 10 minutes, or if you could come back by about 25 after 7, and we're going to wrap up with our questions. If you have any questions you want to ask, make sure you write them on your card, and we're going to come around collecting them. Attorney Shanahan would like to say a few words.
Just a few. The detective mentioned powers of attorney, and I want to expand on it. He started hitting on things. I want to go all the way. Powers of attorney
think about who you're giving that power to, like the detective said. It's very important. Don't get emotional. Don't say, well, it's all my 3 kids. It's not going to work. Okay? You're giving them the power not only to pay your bills, but to sign tax returns, buy and sell your home. Anything of a financial nature you can do, they're going to be able to do. Do you want to give that to your children? You don't have to. You give it to somebody else. Think about that. That's just a one, I just have a document done and put it away. It's very important. And always remember, if you do the power of attorney, you can terminate the power of attorney as long as you're still competent. So if you see your son or daughter doing funny things, you can terminate the power of attorney and go after them. Now, one of the bigger problems we found out by working with the Hunterdon County Prosecutor's Office, I found a small lawyers group, another lawyer, and we talk about these practical issues. And the biggest problem was that we had a case came to my office, and it was a grandson who said that, or a grandmother, grandma had given the daughter power of attorney. She cleaned out the grandmother for $300,000 and didn't pay anything on the 2 rental properties. She lost those as well. Grandma was penniless, daughter disappeared. I said, did you go to the prosecutor's office? He said, yes. The prosecutor's not going to prosecute. So I called the prosecutor, who's a friend of mine, and I said, well, what's the problem with this? And he pointed out something very interesting. The bank had seen the power of attorney and put the daughter on as a joint account owner. And if your son or daughter or power of attorney is a joint account owner, they have a right to 100% of your asset. Okay, so they can take it. There isn't anything the prosecutor can do. They have legal rights to the money. So I found out from clients and talking to banks, not surprisingly, that the banks aren't putting the POA after the person's name. They're making them joint account holders. So you make your daughter power of attorney, and you go into the bank with the power of attorney to be put on the accounts. The bank personnel probably doesn't know to put POA after your daughter's name. And when they do that, they make you a joint account owner. The prosecutor will prosecute if it says POA after their name, because then they have, being power of attorney or agent under a power of attorney, they have a legal responsibility to spend that money in the best interest of mom or dad, not themselves. So it's really important that if you're going to have a power of attorney and you're going to have a son or daughter on your bank account, that you make sure the letters POA appear after their name on the account. Don't let them say otherwise. That one bank said we can't do that. Nonsense. They can do it. They have to do it or go somewhere else. Okay? Very important point. Another point is you don't have to accuse them of theft. Let's say your daughter is a joint owner on your account and life happens to them. They go bankrupt, they get divorced, they get sued, or pass away. Well, now your money's involved with the U.S. bankruptcy trustee in the litigation, in their estate. You want to avoid that. So it's a double-edged sword. Bottom line is always make sure POA is after your agent's name on your account. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. That was great. I have 3 questions that I'm going to pose to the panel, and I'll let them decide who would like to answer, and maybe both or more than one would like to. First question is, does the Division of Social Service investigate when clients come in to apply for Medicaid nursing home and are not eligible because the children have taken the client's money? If these clients are in the hospital, they are stuck there.
So, it can be an exploitation case, right? So, but we don't, unless we get the referral, we don't traditionally investigate a case like that. But we do see a lot of people who are made ineligible because of transfers of finances, assets to their children, whether they agree to it or whether they don't agree to it. And then they find themselves ineligible for Medicaid because there's a 5-year look back. And if you have transferred assets within that 5-year period, you are dinged by Medicaid for those assets, for that money. So if it's a house, you could be deemed ineligible for Medicaid for years, because it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. So people have to be aware of the 5-year look back when they are giving gifts or when their children are taking their inheritance a little bit early, which does happen, they will be ineligible for Medicaid services. And if they need a nursing home, then they're going to have to self-pay. And they might not have those assets anymore because they've given them away or they've been stolen.
In a situation, can your IN workers make a referral to you on this situation?
Sure,
Okay.
yes. We
Do they?
do.
Have they been trained
Sometimes
in
they
that?
do, yes. But I mean, again, a lot of that depends on whether or not the person has capacity, right? And whether or not they had agreed to that asset transfer. If somebody is, obviously has dementia, is, suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's, and did not make that decision, or the POA is questionable, or something like that, then those are the kind of cases we would get involved in.
So as a volunteer guardian, if I pick up a case that I see that there's money missing, can I then refer it to you?
Yes, of course.
Good question, thank you. Second question. Given the number of older New Jersey residents, is there any legislation/media efforts to make the residents of the state aware of the elder abuse concern that is similar to child abuse initiatives and programs?
We only wish. No, there's not, unfortunately. New Jersey is not known, unfortunately, for its advocacy for older adults as much as other states are. So there isn't really a strong initiative at this point, but I'm aware of her.
A number of years ago, the New Jersey Foundation of Aging really kind of took this issue on and had done advocacy for about 5 or 6 years, and then their executive director had moved on. And it, like a lot of things, it comes in cycles. I mean, if we had a banner headline case, unfortunately, then the attention will kind of increase. In the absence of that, it's a smoldering issue.
What do we need to do to set it on fire?
Well, so for APS, we do collect a lot of data.
Excuse me, Susan. One of the questions was, what is APS?
I'm
Could you?
sorry.
Thank you.
APS is Adult Protective Services. But we do collect a lot of data. We enter into a database. Every county has a database, and we report up to the state. We started in 2017. The state APS started to report up nationally. And the idea is that there will create more awareness once we get a bigger picture of what's going on nationally. That we'll get more funding for APS, that it'll bring awareness to the problem. But to someone's point, it's not as sexy, or it's not as
Scandalous in
yes.
some ways.
I mean, so it needs to be brought to light, and I think as the population ages, as the scams get bigger, as people start to lose more and more money, and we have seniors in really bad straits, I think, hopefully there will be more awareness.
One aspect too that I think we didn't touch on is that many older adults are reluctant to admit that their children have done this to them. Part of it is the shame that they feel. Part of it is that there's emotional manipulation being done by the families to threaten them in some ways, to prevent them from speaking up. But one thing we were also seeing is, unfortunately, and it's going to come to this at some point, there really hasn't been, for lack of a better way of putting it, a celebrity case to bring this into the sensationalistic news, in a sense. And that's a good thing, but unfortunately that may be the only thing that really brings it to the forefront of society's, awareness.
The only way there's going to be change, and I think we had a nice news report that brought this issue to the forefront, it would only be temporary, it would fade. The only way it's going to happen is if enough people get angry enough and do something on their local level, at their towns, particularly in the county. A lot of organizations that are funded by the town, the counties, and the state that have statutes that require agencies to do things. Unfortunately, they're not given the staffing, they're not given the money to do the job that they're supposed to do. That's the problem right there. Other states have done a great job in this area. We haven't. There's been no sexy stories in Massachusetts or California. Well, you've heard some here tonight. There are plenty more. Anytime I talk about this, people are shocked about some of the things that I can tell. But yet, we keep going on with this. You're going to have to get involved. You're going to have to talk to your town councils. You're going to have to go to the freeholders. And you're going to have to talk to your assemblymen and state senators. I belong to the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. We have a lobbyist that goes to Trenton. She tells us, with some exception, you talk about elder care issues and their eyes roll back of their heads and they fall asleep. Okay? That can't happen. You've got to start talking about this before somebody gets really hurt. That's the only way to solve it, in my opinion.
There was one other question. How do you get an emergency guardian? Anybody want to jump to that? Emergency guardian?
Sometimes the term emergency gets is misused. An emergency guardian is where a situation where someone's going to die unless someone can make healthcare decisions for them. They're incapacitated or unconscious, and they have to undergo a life-saving procedure or need some kind of treatment, and there's no one that can make decisions for them. In that case, we have to go to the court. Now, the court has procedures that we have to follow. We're particularly going to need some evidence. We're going to need doctors to step forward and give me affidavits stating what exactly the problem is, why it's such an emergency situation, and what specifically needs to be done. And I can run into court, and I can go through the process and try to get a judge to hear the case quickly. And in that case, sometimes they'll even do it over the phone. The court rules allow us to have a hearing over the phone in those cases. They're extremely rare. Certainly volunteer guardianship, to my knowledge, has never undertaken that type of situation. We kind of mean like a special guardian, where there's someone who, an average guardianship case will take at least 90 days to go through the courts before a guardian is actually appointed. This is an area where the courts are rightfully very careful. This could be kind of funny stuff, business going on here. The court has to know, the judge wants to know whether this is on the up and up, because it's taking away somebody's freedom. So there's going to be people investigating, reporting back to the court. It's at least a 90-day process, depending on the docket, it may be longer. But there may be a situation where a person can't wait 90 days, they need help right now. Maybe they need to apply to Medicaid, they're stuck in the hospital, and they need to get out, and they have no money. Or if they get out of the hospital needs to place them in a nursing home. They can't because the guy has no money, so we need someone who has the legal authority to act on their behalf. So we'll go into court, we'll file the necessary papers, and we'll ask the judge to appoint a guardian, a temporary guardian, who can go out and take care of these things while the judge is determining whether or not a guardianship should be granted. That's called a temporary guardian. That's really involved in a lot of that, and as Linda said, we have one guardian who specializes in that. Now, when she's done getting that help that they need, and usually by the time the 90 days are up, or 120 days, whatever the court calendar is, whenever the judge is ready to have that hearing on whether or not to grant a guardian, by that time they've done what they need to do, and we can put in a full-term guardian. The temporary guardian can step out, she does, and we get another volunteer who's going to be with that person on long-term. That's how it works.
Thank you.
Just want to, I'm sorry, yes?
Question?
Sure.
Yeah, Mr. Shanahan, regarding previously what you said to change the laws in the state, that we need to get involved by reaching out to freeholders and senators. Does the volunteer legal guardianship invite these people to programs such as these?
Yes.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah.
The question is, we were talking about taking action, contacting our representatives. Does volunteer guardianship ever invite them to programs like this? Yes, we do. And some show up. Most of the times they do not. They're very busy. But I can tell you this, that whenever I've contacted our local state representatives, they want to talk to me. I have a case going on right now, which is very horrific, and the person is stuck in the hospital, and we're going to try to get Medicaid. He was denied because his son stole money. So he's Medicaid, he can't get Medicaid for at least 3 years because of the penalty. So I've talked to some of our representatives, and when this is over, they want me to sit down with them because the hospital is losing tens of thousands of dollars while this man is stuck in the hospital because they can't release him to a safe environment. He no longer needs hospital care, but they can't release him because he's got no money. Well, Medicaid denied him benefits because his son stole the money. I've proven that the man did not have any capacity when the son got the power of attorney and stole the money. And now I have to go to an appeal, which is going to be another 90 days. The hospital is losing its shirt. And I have no doubt that I'm going to win that appeal under a hardship case. But something has to be done where some of these situations can be decided on the local level by the county office instead of having to go to Trenton to do an appeal. And it's just not right. So I'll be talking to them about that. And there's a group of attorneys I meet with. We invite them and we talk to them as well. You can too. You'd be surprised how open they are to talking to you. Just call them up. They'll talk to you. Tell them what you think. Be nice. They're very receptive. They're very receptive to state representatives, and you should go talk to them. We always think, we're going to talk to the federal government. No, don't talk to those guys. They'll just screw it up. Talk to your town council, your county. Talk to your state. That's where things get done. Okay? Thank you.
I would just like to say one thing.
I'm sorry.
Miss, I'm sorry. That was a great question. Do they get involved? We invite them to a lot of our events. I think we participate in county organizations, but I think we're so focused on doing our small little job for the small people, with the small staff that we have. But that's a great idea to keep them in mind for more of these education things and make a more proactive effort to say, hey, we're having this tonight, but tonight was really informative. I think it would be great to get more of that out there.
Yeah, and I think they need to hear this.
Absolutely, I agree. Thanks for that suggestion.
So that was the perfect segue, Kent, for, just 1 second, I will take your, on your evaluations tonight, which are in your packets, please write down what you would like to hear in the future, because it's important to have that written in front of us. When the education committee comes together, we look at what the recommendations were for future programs, so please help us with that tonight. Go ahead.
There's a caregiver group that meets here at the hospital or over at across the street, and their group have gotten together and they've invited Congressman Malinowski is going to come and have coffee with the caregivers, and they're going to at the end of this month, and we're going to speak with him. Also, in Warren County, at the United Way, or Warren, Somerset, I think Morris, there's a caregiver survey that's been developed. And 1 in 5, I think, people are caregivers, and they're, again, trying to get this out. There is some legislation. Senator Menendez is sponsoring some, caregivers to get some pay for their loved one. And also, the Alzheimer's New Jersey will be meeting at the medical center at the end of this month, 8 o'clock in the morning, for 2 hours to, again, talk about some things. And I think that's what's wonderful about the group that you do, that we really have to get together for more funds and for ourselves.
Thank you for that. Pat?
Is the New Jersey State Bar Association doing anything to put together legislation, proposed legislation, that would be better and make us closer to Massachusetts?
No. I'll reserve my comment. The New Jersey State Bar Association is most people think it has some oversight over attorneys. It doesn't. It's really it's a trade organization. So I can join it if I want. I don't have to, as a lawyer, I don't have to join it. And they have special committees, subcommittees. One was on elder law, disability law, which I belonged to for many years. Unfortunately, I'm in a rare time I won't say what I think. To answer your question, no, they're not doing anything.
Yeah, because other sections are proposing legislation and very effectively.
Yes, they get involved in legislation, but they take a real, lots of days of review of it. They don't really like push it. They try to push it off on other committees if it's a similar, we have a co-interest. It's not very effective. The better organization is the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys.
We have a couple other questions. Can you explain the difference between vulnerable and incapacitated? Anybody want to take a shot?
So we think of vulnerable in APS as someone who is at risk for one of these abuses or exploitation. So we see this a lot in neglect cases where a family is blocking services, for example, for somebody, or they're not following the discharge plan that they agreed to when this person was in the hospital and now is at home. We see this also in self-neglect cases where they're, for whatever reason, for whatever their disability is, they cannot facilitate services for themselves. And in those cases where you can get in there and put services in, plug the holes that need to be plugged, and the person can go on and live a healthy and, safe life in their home, then, then we can move on. They were vulnerable, and we mitigated that risk. If someone is incapacitated, it's really more of a legal designation. So those people we think of as needing guardians or needing someone else to make those decisions for them. So it's a heavier label.
Another question. What % of investigations are confirmed or substantiated?
About half.
And does the confirmation, I can't read this next word.
That was my question.
Oh.
Sorry about my handwriting. So do you find that the confirmation rate increases with the age of the subject?
Not
Not really?
necessarily. Not necessarily. Particularly in exploitation cases, it runs the gamut. So.
There was another question, keep standing. Do you get many self-reports?
We do get some self-reporting. Not a lot, but we do get some. And typically those are people who do have capacity and are just searching for services and need some help in their house. We still will go out and see them and put in whatever services they need. But we do get a few.
Are there any other questions? Okay, it's prize time.